presentation is Cats Can't Talk and Other Observations, and the personal journey through humor and comics. So what you can see here is basically a cast shot of Professor Hobo, which is a comic strip that myself and a good friend of mine, David Rothwell, created together just about 9 years ago at this point. We were basically in college as underclassmen when we originally created it. Since then, it's been published in newspapers. It's been the animated version of it has aired nationally on television. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes as we go through it. But the focus of this presentation is going to be on the humor. But I want to start off by giving you a little bit of history about Professor Hobo so that you have a fairly good idea about it. So the history of Professor Hobo. Basically, Professor Hobo was created one night about 3 o'clock in the morning when Dave and I were up late, and I said, you know, we should really create our own comic strip. That was our idea behind it. He said, well, what's it going to be about? I said, well, it's going to be about a drunken professor and his drug-addicted cat. And no, we hadn't been drinking, but that was still like the premise that we came up with. And he laughed. He said, nobody wants to read something like this. And I said, no, I think somebody will. I think somebody's going to want it. So the very next morning when we got up, the college newspaper actually had an ad looking for a new comic strip to run in it. So we kind of consider that perhaps fate or just really, really stupid coincidence. So upon creating Professor Hobo, we had to create our main character. And this is basically some design sketches how we started out. You can look at, if we're going to have a hobo as a character, how do you make a hobo as a likable main character? And you see that when we started out, those first 3 drawings, he's a little more sinister and threatening looking. And we decided, no, that's just not going to work. People aren't going to like this guy, and we want people to like the main character. And then 4 through 6 get a more sort of cartoony, likable version. The 2 at the bottom, the one on the left is the design that originally ran in the comic strips. And the one on the right is the sort of more refined version that we ended up for the animations. And we had to do it a bit more refined because when you're doing animation, it's much more difficult to have that sort of sketch look to it. It's really hard to animate that, so we needed something that was more defined with more hard lines to it and everything. So the Professor Hobo universe basically consists of 3 different types of characters. There are the professors and administrators, the students, and the local townies. And yes, that is an alligator in a Southern gentleman suit. That character is named Bonafide T. Gator. He happens to be one of our fan favorite characters. And he pops up from time to time in the world of Professor Hobo. So after doing the comic strip for a while, we decided we're really big fans of animation. We'd really like to take this and do it as a cartoon. And we thought about, well, how do we make this into a cartoon? And it posed some real issues for us. How do you cast voices for characters so well defined in your own mind? Which was a major issue for us because we knew who these characters were, but we didn't necessarily know what they sounded like. So for example, Mr. Mintz, the cat character there in the center, he alone, I think we had over 20 people come in and read for, including ourselves. And nobody could ever get the voice right until we finally found one person who was actually a theater major who was able to come up with a voice that we liked. And how does a 4-panel comic universe translate into a more free-roam comic universe? And so we struggled with that a little bit, but we eventually made a cartoon version. That cartoon version has aired on college sports television, which is now, I believe, referred to as CBS College Sports. So it aired nationally on that channel. And also aired locally on a few different channels and different things like that. It's aired in film festivals and different things over the years. So I wanted to show you one real quick, and let me give you a quick bit of setup. This is one that we actually just put online about 2 months ago, I guess, 2 or 3 months ago. It's more topical, more current events. I think it'll be fairly obvious once you start watching it. So I'll play that now for you real quick.
What are you watching?
Tigers on TV apologizing.
Good morning, and thank you for joining me. Many of you in this room are my friends. Many in this room know me. Many of you have cheered for me, or you worked with me, or you supported me. Now, every one of you has good reason to be critical of me. I want to say to each of you, simply and directly, I am deeply sorry for my irresponsible and selfish behavior I engaged in. I know people want to find out how I could be so selfish and so foolish. I knew my actions were wrong, but I convinced myself that normal rules didn't apply. I never thought about who I was hurting. I thought I could get away with whatever I wanted to. I felt that I had worked hard my entire life and deserved to enjoy all the temptations around me. I felt I was entitled.
I think it's a shame everyone beats up on that poor tiger. Do people have nothing better to do than poke their noses into others' business? Who's teaching classes?
That's it. 5 more minutes, then I'm just leaving.
Okay, so we continue to produce those little segments that we put online and everything for our audience. But the focus of this is really, now that you have a background, it's really on humor, and specifically about our humor and how we define it in Professor Hobo. How do we create things that we hope other people will find humorous? So humor tends to be a very slippery beast. What is funny in one context and to one audience is not to another. This is a strip that we actually ran late last year with cartoon versions of David and myself, basically discussing the end of the year and everything, and sort of poking a little fun at that problem that about the poor writing and the poor artwork in the comic strip. So again, things that often come up and will be funny to one person aren't necessarily to other people. So I spent several months basically doing exhaustive research chronicling what are the type of jokes in America's Funniest Videos and Family Guy, and then I just completely threw that out and made up some numbers. So these are some pie charts that I created for it. So you can see America's Funniest Home Videos. A lot of the humor comes from people getting hit in the crotch, animals and children falling down, and women being surprised. And Family Guy, jokes about Lincoln or Kool-Aid Man being gay, Meg being ugly, or Peter being fat is where a lot of the humor comes from in both of those shows. So that works for those two shows, but it's not exactly our style of humor for Professor Hobo. Even if we think it's hilarious when children fall down, it's not exactly the type of humor that we do in Professor Hobo. So if those shows aren't influenced us, what did influence us? Well, growing up in the 70s and 80s, 3 big influences on us were Monty Python, Dilbert, and The Simpsons. And as we look at these strips as we go along, I think you'll see those influences coming out.